ما اعتراف منم اولنا خونده ازی سرزمین را که امروز مدبلش جمع شده مردم گاردیگل ایواراره ما احترام خو پیش منم برای بزرگهای گذشته و فعلیشی. Hello, my name is Asghar Ali. I would like to explain to you my story and how I have ended up before you tonight. I'm Hazara, belonging from Uruzgan province in Afghanistan. It is one of the most dangerous provinces in Afghanistan. Because of the security situation, my family fled the country to neighboring city of Quetta, Pakistan. I grew up in Quetta until the age of 16. The situation in Quetta became worse. Bomb blasts and target killing on Hazaras by the terrorist organization Lashkar-e-Jangvi. In Quetta, Pakistan, Hazaras are trapped into two small pockets called Hazara Town and Mariabad. There is no guarantee of life if you exit these two areas. The graveyard in the area is taking more and more bodies every day. Some days 1 or 2, some days 25 to 30, depending on the terror action of the terror cells. In early 2012, my dear mother had to make a decision that I am sure no parents would like to make. Spend your life saving to put the life of her son into the hands of people smugglers or wait for his certain death in Quetta. Late one evening, she sat me down. With tears in her eyes, she told me that the following day I would be picked up by people smugglers to try and make my way to safe shores of Australia. I was 16 years old. How would I make it on my own to this new land? And if I survived the journey, how would I support myself? I was only a boy who dreamed of playing football and protecting my mother and 6 siblings. The next day, I was introduced to a local man. He arranged my journey from Pakistan to Indonesia. It was my first journey without my family. It was hard to separate myself from my family, but there was no other choice. At this stage, I was a bit aware of my journey ahead, but I was not aware of full danger and risks. I remember arriving at Karachi airport. It was my first time in an airport. It was my first time being around so many people. I was given a kitabcha, a fake passport, a cheap mobile phone, and a mobile number of next person to contact in Indonesia. I am told to follow the crowd at the airport and to not look nervous. I had no idea how I would achieve that. On arriving in Indonesia, I followed the people, presented my kitabcha to the customs officer, and waited to see if he will let me through. I only had a carry bag with my kitabcha, the mobile phone I was provided, and a few shirts. When I heard the customs officer stamp my passport, I was a bit relieved, but now more nervous than ever. This was really happening to me. I followed the instruction of the man who put me on plane in Pakistan. Walk out of the terminal. Ring the number that was preloaded on the phone and wait. I called. Someone answered, and in a few minutes, I was picked up and transferred to a safe house in Bogor, Indonesia. I can never forget the feeling walking into that house. It was a 2-bedroom house. It's smelling very bad, and the roof was leaking. The room I was given only had a single blanket on the floor. Let me explain how the people smugglers work. First, they put you in a separate houses, and when the time comes close for your boat, they put you in a random group of 8 to 10 people. One day, I was contacted by another Hazara man. He introduced himself as my group leader. He told me I would be provided with a new mobile phone and that I must keep it on and have my bags packed. I would then wait for his call with more instructions. I remember sitting in the safe house wondering about my family and the journey ahead. I was scared. I was alone. I can remember thinking how many 16-year-old boys were like me. How many were sent from home with a fact capture, having to solve problems that were way beyond our level of understanding. How many boys would never see their mother again. The next day, my group leader instructed me to come to his place, as we would soon be leaving for Australia. It was the first time I had left the safe house since arriving in Indonesia. The streets were unfamiliar and people speaking an other language that I cannot understand. On arriving to the address, the first thing I was asked to switch off my mobile phone and surrender it to the group leader. There was 8 to 10 more Hazara men already in the house. They were very mature in age, but amongst them there was a young boy, same as my age. His name was Matin. Matin and I started talking to each other, became good friends. We talked about our journey ahead, our journey to Indonesia, joked about who was a better football player, and talked about how afraid we were to take the boat journey. I was glad to have a friend now. After spending about a week in the house, one night, around midnight, the group leader started waking everyone and asking us to get ready. We would leave this house for another one. After 1 hour, there were some private cars that pulled up. We were told to get in. Matin and I made sure we got in the same car. We arrived at another house. Now, there were 50 to 60 men all together in the house. Matin and I spent another week in there, still disconnected from the outside world. The time had come. We were told by the group leader that in a few minutes we would leave this house and head for the boat that would take us to Australia. The group leader explained that the journey would take 3 days. We were not to bring a single thing with us: no food, no water, no clothing. We were told that everything we needed for the journey would be provided on the boat. Matin and I stayed together. We told each other that we would help each other. A car pulled up. Matin and I got in. We arrived at a beach and boarded a small boat that would take us to the big boat. When Matin and I got into the big boat, we couldn't believe it. There had to be over 150 people on the boat. We searched for a place to sit. We asked around for a life jacket. None were left. Matin and I looked at each other with worry. We were the only ones on the boat without a life jacket. And we would have to stand for 3 days straight. For a moment, I wondered what my mother would think if she knew this is the path she sent me on. I could only pray to survive the journey. On the second or third night of the journey, the water was very rough. The boat felt like it would flip over and sink at any moment. I remember the sounds of the boat and the sounds of the people. Everyone was mentally prepared that we would not make it through the night. Matin and I thought we would all die soon. People started praying and holding each other. There was a fear on our faces. I also make my kalma, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. This is the thing we Hazaras say the moment before we die. Matin and I were still together. and making a painful smile at each other. Somehow, the boat survived the rough water, but it delayed the duration of the journey. We ran out of food and water. A few nights later, we were blinded by a massive beam of light. All of a sudden, 3 to 4 men with guns jumped on the boat and were talking into microphones. Neither Matin nor I could understand anything. They checked every corner of the boat. People started to say it is the Australian Army. And yes, it was an Australian Navy ship. Next day, everyone was transferred to the island's detention center. The following day, we were able to wait in a massive line to call home. When it comes my turn, I only managed to say, "Hi, Mother. I'm here at Christmas Island 7 Sound. They are providing enough food." A few cheerful words from her, and my calling time was over. After an initial health check, we were allocated rooms. Matin and I asked if we could have the same room. Luckily, they said yes. We filled our days playing soccer and dreaming of our future in Australia. Both Matin and I swore to each other that we would both study our schooling and study at university. After 1 month, Matin and I were transferred to mainland Australia. Because of my age at that time, 16 years, I was transferred to Darwin's Family Detention Center and Matin to Western Australia's detention center. We instantly lost contact. We never had time to exchange information. After all, we didn't have mobile phones, email addresses, or even an Instagram account. My friend was gone, and I was all alone again. Once I was out of detention center, I was given accommodation and was really on my own. At the age of 16, I was fully independent with no guardians and had to take responsibility of my life in Australia. Looking back, I think the biggest struggle was how to cook for myself. I started ESL classes, and when I received my permanent residency visa, I attended Chisholm Institute of TAFE to complete my VCE year 11 and 12. While doing my year 12, I applied for university for studying electrical and electronics engineering. When I got the result of VCE exam, I got 36 out of 100. I was happy about my exam's outcome because I did my exam in a total new country for me, in another language, and staying away from schooling in my back country. I wondered what score Matin has got and if he is attending university. When I was at my first year at university, I heard from a university friend about CareerSeekers, and I immediately registered. Within a few months, I had started an internship with Landlease on Cross-Yarra Partnership. I loved work and started working enough money that I could look after myself and afford call back home to my mother. This year in February, I attended the Career Trackers Leadership Conference in Sydney. When I arrived, I could not believe how many people were there. We were all wearing these shirts, and it looked like a sea of students. The first task when we arrived was to take a group photo on the field of the stadium. There were hundreds of students, and the CEO of CareerSeekers was shouting at everyone to get closer and closer so we would all fit in the camera's eye. Most people were bumping to each other trying to fit in. I was being pushed from all directions. I turned around to look if I can push myself into the camera without bumping to anyone. With all of these people around, I started to notice someone is staring at me. I couldn't figure out why, and started thinking, why is this guy staring at me? And within an instant, I realized that it is Matin. My friend from Indonesia. At that point, we didn't care about the CEO yelling at us. We ran to each other and started hugging and asking about our new life in Australia. We exchanged contact numbers and spent every minute of the conference together. At the end of the week, we walked to the train station together. I was heading back to Melbourne and Matin back to his home in Sydney.
I was so happy to reconnect with my friend that day. I would have never imagined to see Asghar again, and that it would be at a leadership conference for Indigenous Australians and refugee students. When I left Asghar at the train station at the end of the conference, it made me reflect on our journey. What did we both go through to arrive at this place in Sydney together? When I arrived in Australia on the 3rd of June 2012, I didn't know what my future was going to be. I was 17 years old, spoke no English, knew little about the Australian way of life, and had never had to fully look after myself. One thing I did know was that my future depended on me. Like Asghar, I am Hazara, a minority ethnic group that is suffering from persecution for a very long time. I was born in a small village called Tamaki in the Hazara populated area of southern province of Ghazni in Afghanistan. As you all may know, Afghanistan is a war-torn country that is suffering from many conflicts. Ethnically, it's a very diverse country and is home to many different ethnic groups. Demographic structure is such that each ethnic group is designated to a certain area. Central Afghanistan, which is called Hazarajat, Hazaristan, or the land of Hazaras, is home to ethnic Hazara. Our village is located in the border of Hazaristan. Taliban, the well-known terrorist organization, has a strong presence in our neighboring villages. In order to travel to the city, we have to cross those villages, and most of the time, it ends up in tragedy for Hazara travelers. Since Hazaras are their prime target, our village and the rest of the Hazara villages nearby are always being at risk of attack by Taliban. When I was 14 years of age, the tensions in my village were explosively escalated, and we were more at risk of being attacked. I became a target of the Taliban and didn't have any other option but to leave my family, my beloved village, and my country. My uncle was living in Pakistan, and it was the best decision to join him. Finally, I left everything behind, my dearest, mom and family. I will never forget the day I left my family in the village. My heart was breaking into pieces. The thoughts that whether I could see my family in the village again was destroying me. I was feeling like everything in the village has grabbed my feet and didn't let me move. But I had no other option but to say goodbye and leave everything behind. My uncle had a grocery shop in Hazara town, so I became his shop assistant. My thoughts were always with my family and the village. I was always thinking about them and often could not sleep thinking about their safety. Then a few months later, my uncle managed to get my family from Afghanistan to Pakistan. The day we reunited again was the happiest day of my life. For the next 2 years, I worked in my uncle's shop. Every day, I started thinking more and more about the meaning of life and what sort of life I could have there in Pakistan. We were living with no documents, and the situation was becoming progressively worse and worse. Hazaras were victims to target killings. It was like I had never left Afghanistan. As a boy in this situation, you quickly become a man. You realize things about life that no other 16-year-old should have to think about. You think about if you'll die in the streets, and you think about how you can support your family. After approximately 2 years living in Pakistan, I had to make a decision. To stay and risk my life living day to day, or flee and risk my life for a better future. That time, many people from Hazara town were leaving for Australia. But the journey was not like boarding a plane and landing in Sydney. Rather, it was the game of life and death, taking a tiny fishing boat from Indonesia to get to Australian shores. After days of thinking, I finally shared my decision with my mom. I was determined to leave. How does a 16-year-old boy convince his mother to let him go? My mom understood the risk of the journey better than me, a young boy, and she immediately responded with a strong no. I understood her decision, but was determined to convince her otherwise. I guess this is where I learned how to negotiate. I was taking every single opportunity to convince Mum, but she would give me the same answer, no. It took a while until I tried to convince Mum for the last time. I asked her, Mom, you know the situation better than me. Would you prefer me to die here or drown in the sea? Mum said nothing for a few days, and after that, told me to pack my bag. A few weeks later, it was the time to say goodbye to my family for the second time. I packed my bag with a pair of shirts and pants and a small Quran that my mom gave me. Saying goodbye at that moment was the hardest moment of my life. When I was leaving my village in Afghanistan a few years earlier, I knew that I would join my uncle and I would see my family again. But this time, it was different. I didn't know if I would survive the journey, and even if I did, I might never see them again. At the age of 17, it's a lot to handle. I wanted to cuddle Mum and never leave her, but I could not even look her in the eyes. The thoughts and feelings of if I could ever see my mum and family again would break my heart into pieces. But it was the moment to say goodbye again. With a piece of a small Quran from my mom, I was off. I boarded a plane with 4 others from Quetta to Islamabad. When the plane was taking off, I was looking down from the window. I was feeling that my heart is not with me. It was a very emotional and frustrating moment. 1 hour later, we landed in Islamabad and waited there for a few days. Then one day, someone came to our hotel with passports and tickets. My photo was the only thing in the passport that was mine. The next day, we boarded a plane, flew to Bangkok, and from there to Malaysia. At customs, some of the men were detained. I made it through and then found myself in a boat towards Indonesia. We made it to shore, drove 3 days, and ended up in Bogor, which is where many people were waiting to get into a boat to take them to Australia. During my stay in Indonesia, I had a few failed attempts to get into a boat. It's very hard to actually get into a boat. You're constantly hiding from police and running when you get caught. During one of my escape from police, I lost my most precious gift, the Quran that my mom gave me when I was saying the final goodbye to her. Months later, I found myself in a safe house making friends with Asghar. The night we left the villa, it was pouring rain. We were driven to a beach, taken by a small boat to the big boat, and were off headed towards an unknown future. The night Asghar described of the dangerous seas was something I can never forget. As the boat was shaking and people were screaming, I sat quietly, almost numb. I remembered my mom and my family. I remembered my mom's words, "You will drown in that boat." It was her biggest fear, and it was coming true. I had convinced her that I'd be safe and my future bright. But as the waves slammed against the side of the boat, I remember asking myself, is it real? Is it really the end? Luckily, it wasn't. After almost a week being at sea, we finally arrived in Christmas Island. Asghar and I often spoke about the journey. One day, word is spread around the camp that a boat had sank. One of Asghar and my friend were on that boat. He and many others suffered the fate that my mom feared most. They lost their life in the sea. After a month in the island, it was the Department of Immigration's turn to make a decision for us. The department decided to transfer me to Leonora Detention Center in WA, while Asghar was transferred to a detention in Darwin. It wasn't only me and Asghar, but we had to say goodbye to all of our friends who were going to be separated. After leaving Christmas Island, I faced many new challenges, such as learning English. I knew that Australia is a different country with different language and culture. I understood that to be able to communicate, learn the culture, and integrate with the society, I must learn English. In my first detention center, I attended school every day and loved it. A few months later, I was released into community detention in Western Sydney. The first thing I did was enrolling in an intensive English language center at Holroyd High. Sometime along my journey, I had a birthday. I can't really remember when or where I was at the time. I was now 18 and needed to enroll in school. My education level was somewhere around year 10. Thankfully, the advisors at Holroyd let me start year 10, despite being 18. It was a bit weird at first, being 18 and sitting in a class with a bunch of 16-year-olds. Many of us were all in the same boat, so everyone was very supportive. I finished high school 3 years later, enrolled in university, and will graduate in November this year. I am studying business. I think my negotiation and problem-solving skills are pretty good. So a business degree was an easy choice. Australia has given me a lot: peace, protection, and the opportunity to gain education. I'm not an Australian citizen yet, but I feel as Australian as a person who was born here. I'm committed to work hard and contribute to this wonderful society. Last summer, I commenced my internship with Commonwealth Bank. It was a great opportunity and a wonderful experience. At the end of that internship, I had the opportunity to apply for the CBA graduate program. Soon after I applied, I was told that I'd been accepted. This is a much better future than I would have imagined, while many people told me that the best option for my future in Australia was to become a checkout chick at Woolies. With a graduate job in hand, I, like my friend Asghar and the rest of the CareerSeekers community, have a future that we hope is afforded to many other refugees in Australia. Thank you very much.